Mike Radich here, and I'm now joined on the phone by MMA veteran Matt Lindland. Matt, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Sure, no problem. Matt, I was watching all the pre-fight stuff and all, leading up to the fight for the Chaelson and Anderson Silva fight, and I noticed during the fight that you weren't in his corner and you hadn't been helping him prepare for the fight. Why is that?
That's a question you're going to have to ask Chael. I started coaching Chael just over 19 years ago, almost 20 years. I've been working with him, and
right.
I coached him all the way up through the last Anderson fight, and worked with him getting ready for Brian Stann, and then did not work with Chael for the Bisping matchup or the rematch with Anderson. And I'm not exactly sure why Chael decided. He didn't leave the gym. He's just working with some other coaches at one of our other locations. I couldn't tell you that exactly why.
Well, on a more positive note, one of the guys that you were cornering, and you have still been coaching, Pat Healy, he just picked up a win against Mizuto Hirota.
No, Patrick did a great job Saturday night at the Strike Force event. Hirota was very tough. He's the dream, and he was the Sengoku champion. Both those organizations over there in Japan, he's won both those titles. I even think he had like a deep title before he even transferred over to the bigger. He did, right?
Right.
So that guy had 3 belts. He was kind of the big guy coming out of Japan. Very tough, as is all the Japanese fighters. Very tough, but he beat one of our fighters back in the Sengoku days. He knocked out Ryan Schultz.
Right.
Sure. So that was a good win. So we gotta get Patrick prepared for probably his toughest challenge yet against Gilbert Melendez.
Mizuto Hirota, he's a champion over in Japan. He's a really tough fighter. He's experienced. He surprised a lot of people in that fight. Did he surprise you at all?
No, not at all. I've seen him fight a lot of times. I've actually cornered against him when he knocked out Ryan. Didn't surprise me. I knew exactly what he was going to do, and I knew exactly how to prepare for him. And Patrick went out and executed the game plan very well. And there was a lot of people saying, they didn't think Pat looked that good that night. But what they don't realize, they just don't know this guy, and they don't know how tough he is. And actually, Pat did a very good job that night, and he had a great performance against a very tough game opponent.
Now, going forward with Pat, it looks like he's going to get the next shot at the title against Gilbert Melendez.
It does look that way, and I think all signs are indicating, we're going to fight Gilbert for the title, and that should be probably sometime in September. But no guarantees have been made. Nothing's been signed, so we don't. We're not going to go ahead and release our own statement. We're going to wait for the organizations to do that. They tend to like that.
Matt, some things that are in the headlines nowadays. I want to get your take on. The first thing is, people talk about, all the shows that are going on in MMA. You got UFC doing a bunch of shows. You got Bellator doing a bunch of shows. Strikeforce is mixed in. Then on the regional circuit, there's shows every weekend. Is there too much MMA going on right now? Because a lot of people feel that there is, sort of a, an overload.
An oversaturation of MMA.
Right.
To us, it doesn't feel like there's enough shows. You got the shows at the highest level, the UFC and Strikeforce, which are the same organization essentially.
Right.
And you have to be a part of that organization. And outside of that, the fans pretty much think if it's not UFC, and they don't even consider Strikeforce even as good as that crowd was the other night, and as good as those fights were on that show. I think your average fan is going to look at anything that is not UFC or branded UFC as pretty much the minor leagues or tier 2 or in some cases, that's just an amateur show. We're doing one of our sports fight shows up in Lake Chelan, Washington at Mill Bay Casino August 4th, and we got some really good fighters on there. But one of the comments that the casino said, well, we don't know any of the names, and it was like, well, did you know Chris Liebman before he was in the UFC? Did you know Ed Herman or Chris Wilson or Did you know Chael Sonnen before he was, who he is now? I mean, those are the kind of guys that we're developing through these smaller shows. But, they're not names until they get there to the big shows, apparently, even though they're really tough, talented fighters. So we do need these leagues, and we do need to develop through those different leagues. I don't know if I think to me, there's an oversaturation of UFC events because, frankly, there's not that many good cards out there. There's a few good fights. But, Tito and Forrest Griffin as a co-main event, maybe 8 years ago I would have been excited about that. That fight does not excite me. Seen it twice already. I don't need to see it a third time. I don't know. It does seem like there's a little oversaturation of stuff the fans don't want to see. And we're kind of getting force-fed guys like Rampage because at one time he was a fairly decent fighter, but we're still getting. Isn't he headliner or co-main?
Yeah, he's going to be the co-main event in Brazil, September or November maybe. I think.
Yeah, aren't we done with him? I thought he was an actor now or something. He doesn't really seem like much of a fighter anymore. I think to answer your question, we might be oversaturating a little bit with stuff we don't want to see, but there's a lot of great young talented fighters out there that I do want to see fight. Guys like that fought on the Sport Fight or Strike Force the other night. Guys like Luke Rockhold,
right.
Guys like Tyron Woodley and Marquardt. That was a great fight. Patrick. There was so many good fights on that card, and then you feed me stuff like Rampage, or you show me, Tito and Forrest, and tell me that's a co-main event level fight. No way.
Another thing, Matt, that now because the Olympics are starting up soon, a lot of people are talking about the wrestlers who are coming in MMA, and they're talking about that it's killing Olympic wrestling. Do you feel that that's happening?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's killing Olympic wrestling. I think we got a very strong team this year. I think we got very talented guys, and maybe wrestling needs to do something, to step up and compensate these athletes a little more to keep them around. I felt like back in the day that when UFC and MMA really started getting started, that USA Wrestling should have jumped on the bandwagon a little earlier and said, hey, we're supporting what these guys are doing, instead of saying, well, we're not. That's not really what we are, and that's not really who we are and what we're doing. Because it is. I mean, people want to brand wrestling, or they want to brand jiu-jitsu or catch wrestling, or how many different names are there for ground fighting or grappling arts? I mean, it's all the same. People want to talk about Gracie's this or Brazilian jiu-jitsu and this is wrestling. It's all the grappling art, and the principles and the fundamentals are the same. I wrote an article on my blog, Coach Matt Lindland, where I coined it, "It's all wrestling." That was the title of my article. It doesn't matter if you're wearing a gi or you're not wearing a gi. It's the rules are different. The scoring system is different. Greco-Roman has a different scoring system than collegiate style wrestling. Jiu-jitsu with the gi has a different style than the no-gi, and the rules and the strategies are a little different. But the art's the same, and the principles and the fundamentals are all the same. So, let's not get too caught up in the names of each of these arts. It's like saying Muay Thai and kickboxing and clinching. It's all mixed martial arts nowadays. I mean, we're mixing everything, we're blending. So USA Wrestling needs to get on board and embrace all the grappling arts. And I think they have. I just wish they would have done it a little sooner.
One thing that maybe you can agree with is I think that on the middle school level, the high school level, I think that MMA has helped wrestling because all these kids are seeing, guys who are coming from the wrestling background doing big things in MMA. Hey, if I learn how to wrestle, maybe in the future, I can transition to MMA. Do you agree with that?
Well, I'm many guys in my gym say, I wish I would have wrestled back in high school. Now I can really use it. So I do hope that is the case, and we are seeing more young men get involved in wrestling or any combat sport. Young men need to be combative athletes. They need to train in some combat sport of some kind, and there's so many good opportunities and so many good options out there. We got a Team Quest. We got an incredible kids program. We teach mixed martial arts, and from that program, a kid could say, you know what, I want to focus on sport judo, or I want to focus on boxing, or maybe I do want to pursue MMA. But they have the options, and we encourage the kids, hey, during the wrestling season, take some time off, go compete in wrestling. Because there just isn't enough opportunity, especially for young kids, to go actually compete in MMA. But to learn how to compete, learn how to get out there and face an opponent one-on-one, that's something that young boys need to learn, because they're going to carry those skills with them throughout their entire life. I mean, how many times in your life have you had to compete for a job or for a position or for money for your family? I mean, we have to compete. We have to teach these young boys how to be warriors and competitors.
Matt, are you officially retired from MMA?
I don't know if there was an official retirement or anything of the sort, but I'm focused on my business, and I'm focused on coaching my athletes right now. And my kids was my number one priority for the past 20 years, was raising my children. My daughter starts college next year. She's my youngest, and so my priorities are going to start changing a little bit of what I want to do. Like I said, my family and raising my kids were my number one priorities for the last 20 years. And not that I'm done raising them or anything, but I can actually do some other things. This year, I've been asked for the last 12 years if I'd come back and coach at the Olympic level. And with the Olympics coming up in London here in just a couple weeks, people are starting to think about Olympics back in January. I agreed to go out and help with the training camp, and I also traveled with the team to a competition overseas this year. So I did get back more into Olympic level wrestling coaching, having some fun with that, as well as coaching my professional athletes in the mixed martial arts. But things change, and your body doesn't respond as well at 42 as it did at 32 or especially 22. So I think, I got to look at other things and opportunities besides just being a competitive athlete.
Takedown Media, are you still involved with them?
Well, Takedown Media is no longer around.
Oh, I hadn't seen anything about it, so that's why I asked. I didn't know if they were still.
Yeah, it just kind of faded away. It was a good concept, and they just didn't have the funding to keep it going to push past the next level. It takes a lot of money to do things on that scale that they were looking to do, and I went out there and I tried to help them as much as I could, but I'm not a venture capital guy, and I don't raise funds like that, so that wasn't my role anyway. And that seemed like the area that they needed the most help on to get that thing off the ground, was raising the money.
Weren't they supposed to broadcast your sport fight events?
Well, we did film it, and they spent a lot of money coming out and shooting that and putting it together, and we did film it, and it's never been distributed anywhere.
I see. Matt, as you look back on your career now, what do you think your best performance was?
Oh, in martial arts?
No, in MMA specifically.
Boy, I don't know. I've had some great fights. I've had a lot of fun ones.
Right.
I've always enjoyed choking out guys that are black belts. And I've done that against a few different guys. Probably a big one was against Travis Luter when he was at the top of his game and I was at the top of mine. Choked out a couple other Brazilian black belts. Carlos Newton was a good win. Early on in my career, I was really excited to get the opportunity to fight somebody like Pat Miletich, and I got to take him out decisively in the first round. So I can't tell you if I've had one fight that's a bigger moment than the other. I think it's the consistency of going out there and competing at the highest level and beating the best guys in the world.
What's your most disappointing or worst moment of your career?
Most disappointing would be when I beat Rampage at the WFA.
Right, right.
I came up with a split decision. You know, another disappointing moment would probably be fighting Fedor in Russia, and
right.
The referees allowing him to
the rope grab,
utilize
yeah.
the ropes,
yeah.
and you know, he's a great competitor, and he did what he was supposed to do, and you know, which is get every advantage that he can get, and I would have done the same thing, but you gotta have the balls to get out there and make the calls, even if you're in their country, and you know, which the referee actually did say I was afraid to make the call. You can't be afraid to make the right call just because you're in Russia.
Two-part question. First part is, who's your best opponent you ever fought, and second, who's the toughest guy you've ever fought?
Best opponent I've ever fought. I've fought a lot of great guys.
Right.
Morello at the time was probably the best opponent I've ever fought, and toughest was probably Joe Dirksen. That guy was so dang tough. I mean, I was beating him up from every position, on the feet, on the ground, and he was still trying submission attempts, and he was hanging in there. What a gritty, tough guy he is.
Was there ever a fight that you went in, you know, maybe overestimating your opponent, like saying to yourself, "Man, this guy's real good. You know, I gotta be in there 100% at my best, or I'm gonna lose, or you know, it's gonna be a long night for me." And then when you got in there, it was, you know, easier than you thought. Was there ever a time like that?
Well, I think sometimes you prepare and you go in there and you have a really good night, and maybe they don't have as good a night.
Right.
I got a couple fights like that. You know, I fought, like I said, Pat Melendez. He was a world champion, one of the best guys in the world. I went out there and had an incredible performance. Another guy I fought up a weight class at 205 was against Mike Van Arsdale, who's somebody that was an incredible athlete. He just had a war with Randy Couture, and I went in there and took him out in the first round. But, you know, it can be just me having a great performance that night and them being a little off that night, and we're both prepared, but somebody had a better night than the other one. That's really all that is.
And on the flip side, not that you overlooked somebody, but I don't know how to put it, but was there ever a time where you're like, well, I mean, you know, this guy, I'm better than this guy. It looks like it's going to be an easier fight. Was there ever a time where somebody surprised you how good they were?
No, not necessarily. You know, I fought guys, you know, later in my career like Robbie Lawler and you know, a tougher one was, you know, Vitor, but I went in there and expected to have really good performances and impose my game plan, and you know, I got caught with big shots early on in the fights, and the fight didn't last. So those were some tough losses.
Was there an opponent out there that you would have liked to fight but you never got a chance to?
Rich Franklin, of course, you knew that. Everybody knows that.
I thought you were going to say JT Taylor.
Oh, that guy's a clown. No.
What about Lee Murray?
Yeah, you know, that would have been a fun one at the time.
Yeah.
You know, he was making a lot of noise, and I was actually fighting in Europe over where he was at, and that would have made a lot of sense. But you know, honestly, I think you know, I got released, you know, just at the right time for Rich to get a big push in the UFC organization. I feel like my skills match up very well with his skills. And he's a tough fighter. He's a very good tough fighter, but that was one that I wanted to compete against, and just never came to fruition.
Is that what's missing from your career? That you never got a chance to fight Rich Franklin, or is there something else that's missing?
I think what's missing from the sport is there's no pure athletic architecture. That says, you know, if you do these things, you're going to fight this guy. And what happens is you've got promoters that are saying this guy deserves a title shot, and the fans don't choose there's no architecture that says this is what it takes. I mean, we all know if you win so many games in an athletic season in the NFL, you're going to end up in the playoffs. If you win the playoffs, you're going to the Super Bowl. Same thing in baseball. You know, you win your conference, you get the pennant there, then you go to the World Series. There's a specific architecture that says you do these things, you're going to fight for the title. You're going to be the champion of the division this year, or the champion of the world this year. And that's what's missing from this sport, is there's no pure athletic architecture. This is an entertainment business where the promoters are making all the money, and they're deciding which fights are going to sell and which fights are going to make money, and they're telling us this guy's the world champion when maybe he hasn't fought the best guys in the world.
The UFC middleweight title, is that something that haunts you at night, that you never won it, or does it really not matter to you?
No, that doesn't haunt me at night. I've accomplished a lot of things in my career. I've got world medals. I've got Olympic medals. I've competed at the highest level in this sport. And the UFC is one organization that made up a title and has done a great job, an incredible job of marketing and promoting the sport. But more importantly, they've promoted and marketed their brand, and they've told everybody that it's the most important title in the sport. And like I just explained, it's at the whim of the promoter. There has never been a playoff or a tournament style since Zuffa's taken over that says this is going to make you win these matches. Back in the early days, everybody showed up and you had a tournament and you fought everybody, and if you won, you moved on to the finals. We don't do that anymore.
If you could only show one fight to maybe your grandkids, 30 years from now, but what would that one fight be?
Oh, I haven't really thought about that question. Maybe I'll just put together highlights, though.
Okay. That's a good answer.
I've had good moments everywhere, and at different times, but I haven't really thought about that one specifically.
There's been some talk recently. Frank Shamrock started it because he was talking about how he wanted to be in the UFC Hall of Fame, and a lot of people say, well, maybe he's not a UFC Hall of Famer, but if there was an independent mixed martial arts Hall of Fame, he'd be in it. Do you think that you're an MMA Hall of Famer? Do you think you're?
Oh, I don't know what that criteria is.
True.
I don't know what that means or what that criteria is.
Right.
Or, I've had some success in this sport. I've had some fun in it, and that's really why I did it. I wanted to compete at the highest level. It wasn't about getting UFC belts or getting in Hall of Fames or any of that. It was just about going out and facing the toughest guys in the world and competing against them.
What do you hope that people will say about you, 30 years from now, 40 years from now? What do you think your legacy in this sport is going to be?
I think the sporting legacy is very finite. I'm more worried about my eternal legacy than what people remember me from in the sport. But I think people will remember that I'm a very tough competitor, and I trained hard. I competed well, and I went out there and I would face anybody in the sport given the opportunity to. At any weight class, I would fight anybody and go out there and put on great performances.
Matt, thank you for being so generous with your time. I don't know if you have any sponsors, but if you do, is there any that you would like to thank? And is there anything?
I have a company that we make and manufacture the best performance underwear there is, Dirty Boxer, and you can just check us out at dirtyboxer.com. And if you're looking to compete, and what happened was when I got into this sport, there really wasn't anything out there like it, and so I developed a product to protect the athletes, their groins, and something comfortable that they can move in. And that's my own company. And certainly check us out at Team Quest, TQ MMA, and that's who we are, Team Quest and Dirty Boxer. And I have a blog out there it's really about coaches and for athletes that want to improve where they're at mentally, physically. CoachMattLindland.com.
Matt, thank you for taking the time to talk. I really appreciate it.
You bet, Mike.